Growing up in Malibu was an interesting place to be a kid, because you are around a lot of children of people who are in the entertainment industry, but also like finance. So as far as being an artistic community, yes, but it's also sort of insular. Like a lot of the artists are like painters who are, in their art studios all day, and I went to public school, and so you were with a whole swath of it. It wasn't like just pure affluence. That was certainly there, but when I was growing up, there were like mansions and mobile homes, and they were right next to each other. But the kids that I graduated high school with were all kids that I had gone to elementary school with. So you know everybody, and everybody's going to each other's birthday parties and whatnot. I don't know if the musical community that I was a part of was necessarily in place until I was close to graduating, and then like shortly after high school. And there were bands that I would sit in with and play with, but a lot of those bands were people that were older than I was, by about 10 or 15 years or something. And so my friend group was a little older. But it was great. I mean, yeah, I grew up playing music with Dwayne Betts, Dickie Betts' son, and Alex Orbison, Roy's son, and getting to be around people who grew up, around some of the heavy hitters. Definitely fed into the fantasy that you concoct while you're listening to these records and, dreaming about how this music was made and where. And my mom loves music, and her energy level is a little more on the Michael Jackson, Mariah Carey, Gloria Estefan side. So that was what was playing in the car with her, but it was playing loud. My dad was a big music fan and grew up around a lot of musicians in the 70s. Like he had a house on Topanga Beach when there were homes on the beach, and he would throw these dinner parties there, and a lot of musicians would show up. And I think Judy Sill was somebody who was around the house a lot because she was dating one of my dad's good friends. He had these records and he was playing them for me, and he was telling me about her and her story. And I was probably 14 at the time, and he was just saying, this is what this woman went through in her life. And then I forgot about it for years, and one day when I was working with Tony Berg at his house, and his cell phone rang, and it was when people first started to be able to make their cell phone ring a song, and his was The Kiss. I was like, what the hell is that? I know that song. Sweet communion of a kiss. Then I kind of revisited all that music, and you don't realize how good something is sometimes when you happen upon it too soon, or the things that you remember about it are like a footnote. When you go back and listen to it when you're older or you have more experience and you hear other things in it, and you fully understand how unusual and gorgeous that music is. So he turned me on to a lot of good music, and he showed me a lot of stuff before I was even ready. He tried to show me The Last Waltz when I was still unable to listen to anything other than Nevermind. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, choosing to watch MTV over doing homework, the rotation of Smells Like Teen Spirit, Black Hole Sun, Enter Sandman, and Man in the Box or something. There was just 4 or 5 music videos that just played on rotation, and they all had some guy with long hair playing electric guitar on it, and I must have just fallen in love with the image of that and the sound of that, and I begged my dad to take me to buy an electric guitar, and he did, and the place we bought it from offered lessons, 10 free lessons if you purchased a guitar. So I asked the guitar teacher to show me how to play Come As You Are, and Smells Like Teen Spirit, and all those songs that were on MTV. After I learned those songs, I don't remember why I kept playing guitar, but I spent a lot of time continuing to play and demystify some of the music that I was listening to. Still mostly grunge and like 90s rock stuff, a lot of which coincidentally was recorded in this room, which is a trip. But at some point, I remember hearing Nina Simone's song Sinner Man, and I like pivoted from rock into mainly like her catalog, and then from her records fanning out a little bit more into other some jazz stuff, some other rhythm and blues stuff.
Oh, Sinner Man, where you gonna run to? Sinner Man, where you gonna run to? Where you gonna run to?
And then also like at that time, I think like all the file sharing stuff started coming to about. So you have like access to Ali Akbar Khan and Nusrat and every sort of like live bootleg record. It's just, everything is right there. So I spent a lot of time in my room just listening to music and falling asleep, listening to records and stuff. It was like that scene in The Matrix where they're like they plug him in and just like pump him full of kung fu and stuff. That's like what kids were doing, you know, in those years. They're just catching up hyperspeed on all this music. There were definitely some scams in there. Or you download Stuck in the Middle with You, you know, credited to Bob Dylan. You're like, wow, this is a really interesting Bob Dylan period. This is good. You're like, wait a minute. I remember feeling a little embarrassed about the things I was doing as a teenager. The rock music I was listening to was also certainly coming out as an influence in the music that I played with my friends, the music that I was writing. So for whatever reason, I felt responsible for keeping the electric side and the rock and roll influences separate from the quote unquote pure world music acoustic side, and just had these different musical personalities. And it was an age where you're also kind of creating your own identity, and so there was like these split personalities that would, it was just very compartmentalized. And I remember, I don't remember how this happened or even necessarily when, but I just remember how refreshing it was when I finally got to an age where I felt comfortable bringing those partitions down and bringing the worlds together and just not feeling like they weren't related, not feeling embarrassed about anything that I liked to do. And it ended up being something that was really helpful doing sessions, like being able to jump from one end of a musical spectrum over to another. It comes in handy when you're helping to make a record or craft a record and you want to paint a more diverse picture somehow. Like having all those influences really helped. The touring that I did outside of the band that I had, like my own band as a teenager, I think it all came from the session work that I was doing. So I'd play on a record for an artist, and then when that artist went to go tour, usually they would ask a lot of the session musicians first if they would like to go out on the road. And a lot of the older ones politely turned it down, and a lot of the younger ones said, yeah, absolutely. And I did a couple of, I did about a year I think, with Julian Casablancas after playing on his first solo record, and the same kind of thing with Jenny Lewis. I did some touring with Lucinda Williams, also about maybe a year, and I really enjoyed it. I think because I was coming off of the experience of touring in a van with my friends and feeling the pressure of, is anybody going to show up to the show, and we've got to promote it and all that. The experience of playing, supporting another artist, and it's their show, and you don't really bear any of the responsibility. Like, you know people are going to show up. It's definitely more comfortable. You know, there's a tour bus maybe, and you're getting paid a per diem. You're like, somebody's handing you money every day. It's just, when I was 22, it was incredible. It was like the best gig you could possibly have. And then by the time I was 25, I was like, I don't ever want to go on tour again. And none of these were things where we were out for 12 months. These tours would be 2 or 3 month tours at the longest. So I could do them back to back. And I did that for about 3 years and just stayed out on the road and made myself sick doing it. I got shingles when I was like 22. I came off of like we went to Japan. Like, I went to Japan twice in a summer or something like that, and I came home and I felt awful. And that's why session work was just such an incredible blessing, to be able to stay in my hometown and have different music thrown at you every day to respond to. It just, in every way, it was the opposite of being on tour and playing the same set every night and constantly being on the move. It was like the perfect balm for the trauma of overdoing it. I don't know that there was anything that felt remarkably different about doing sessions at Tony's home studio from doing a session at Capitol. The setting and the artist didn't really have a huge influence on what I felt like I was there to do, which was more nerve-wracking, you know, like trying to imagine a role in these records that was invisible enough but supportive enough that it didn't step on anybody's toes. And I really wanted to always think outside the box to find something that was a really perfect fit for the track, for the record or something. And that was what I was doing in sessions, was like listening to what was already taking place, because I don't know if I was always the only guitar player. Like, usually in a session there might be another guy there, and so you kind of figure out what to do as a team. And so I never wanted to just double down on what the other musicians were playing. I was like always trying to respond and stay out of the same zone as somebody else. That, I think, grew out of a lot of those years listening to music, you know, with headphones on at night, listening to like live at Fillmore East, and trying to imagine, okay, what if there was a third guitar? What would it be doing? What would it be doing that, like, everybody else in the band would go, oh, that sounds good, like they can come back tomorrow. So it didn't feel any less high stakes, you know, doing it in a home studio setup versus like a professional commercial studio or something like that. Most of the stuff that I've worked on has been a product of something else that I worked on. Like, a lot of the artists that I've gotten to collaborate with, it's been because they heard something else that I was a collaborator on, or something else that I made. And the first solo record that I made was something that Brittany Howard and the rest of the guys in the Shakes were all fans of. And I think for their second record, they were really wanting to paint a more surreal depiction of their music and their band and the way that they play, in response to maybe on the first record having things be more literal or more live. I think they wanted to augment the reality of that a little bit somehow, but not really know how. And I think they heard some of that in my first solo record and asked if I would spend some time with them and listen to some of the new songs that she had and her demos. And I just started to go out to Alabama and Tennessee and spend time with them in a studio and demystify that thing that makes you kind of like nervous or clam up in the studio, you know, like when you're paying for like a big studio and all of a sudden you start thinking like, well, we just got to get our record, you know, we got to get our money's worth. From growing up here, I'd spent more, I was really comfortable in studios, and so it was easier to make it feel kind of like a a clubhouse and like let's just get all of the gear out. Let's put it out on the floor, and it's not about just like set up the drums, get a great drum sound, and what's the first song we're gonna do. It's like let's listen to you play it on an acoustic guitar first, and just sort of imagine what the rest of the record sounds like, instead of everybody just plugging in and starting and just trying to approach it in a unique way. And Sean Everett, the engineer, and I were mostly working together on everything at that point. Like we sort of grew up together working at Tony's house, and he mixed my first solo record. So it was something I brought him into that based on their appreciation of that record. It was just like, I know they liked that, and there's some weird stuff on that, so let's just see how far they want to push it. But like, I think they wanted to challenge the idea of who they thought they were through their fans' eyes. They'd be like, yes, you know us as that, but that's not really who we feel like we are. And I thought that so accurately described the way most artists feel. It's like you make a record to try to, or write a song to try to reveal something about yourself, and you spend all this time meticulously crafting it and revising, and then you put it out and somebody goes, oh, I love that song, and it makes me think of Jerry Rafferty, and you're like, oh, so it can be a really frustrating process trying to be understood in a specific way through your work. It's not even that people necessarily have to dislike it for it to be an experience where you're like, you feel like you somehow failed a little bit, that you're never quite understood in the way that you want to be understood. I think the result of like a record, in any way in which it's different from the last one, is a product of what you're inspired by at the moment and what you did the last time around, and how comfortable you feel stepping away from something that worked. It is a weird behavior that some artists have. Is like, there's a thing that really works, like let's say a band has a hit song. Like 9 times out of 10, that's the song they do not want to play, but they do so begrudgingly for their fans. Like, they're just so sick of it at this time. Like, ugh, okay, we gotta play this song. It's an odd behavior to like take something that was by definition a success and actively try to move away from it. But I've certainly felt that urge to pan away from things that feel like they're becoming part of my identity. And I become aware of that when I start to get asked to come in and do something on a song that I've done on a previous song, whether it be play slide or synth guitar or fretless or something. You start to realize like people are expecting that, and maybe the contrarian in me is just wanting to like withhold that, or it's part of the joy that I get out of this is coming up with my own idea, and like it's one area of life where you have the freedom and enough control to do that. And so when that gets taken away from you, even lovingly, or even like by people who are fans of what you do, it doesn't quite have that same effect. You don't get the same sort of dopamine rush from it, I suppose. Probably overanalyzing something that's really simple, but it definitely fuels the search for new sounds and techniques or approaches, or even in some cases it's been the reason why I just take a break from guitar altogether, because it's just I can't hear my own voice on the instrument, so I don't really want to play it and be reminded of that. I just kind of wait it out, and then come back and reapproach it from some new angle, hopefully. A lot of the times that I've had playing in rooms with other musicians, it's part of the thing I hope to recreate on records, is that sound and the sense of space. When you hear something that you build from a loop, or you start to listen to the music and you can kind of see the grid and you can see the Pro Tools session and everything's kind of flat and more two-dimensional. There are a few exceptions, but I feel like for the most part I don't have the transportative experience that listening to music gives me, listening to my favorite music. Having the depth of field conveyed in the sound is part of what helps me feel like there's a moment that was captured or something, or that there's a performance taking place. But yeah, I love listening to music and feeling like I'm in the room or in the world in which it was created. And getting to be in this space at Sound City for a few years now and really learn the room and explore and experiment has made that all the more possible. Whereas sometimes when you set up in a commercial space to make a record, you don't have that it's a little more luck of the draw, and you have to try to create that depth of field with the instrumentation. And here we can actually spend enough time tweaking and with mic placement and things, where in some cases we've really just been able to capture the sound of the room pretty truly. Just being here has allowed for certain records to happen and opportunities to happen that otherwise I don't think ever would. The Pino record was certainly a product of being in this space, because when we first started working together on that music, the nature of it was much more in the box editing of demos and pre-existing sessions and things. And then we got in here and it was like, well, what if we were to track it in here and kind of use it as an excuse to experiment and learn the space a little better. And one of the first things that we worked on after getting in the building here and setting up was the first track on the Pino record, Just Wrong. And it was kind of like getting a new car and like seeing how fast it would go. The whole depth of field thing that you were talking about, we were like, what if we have some things hyper-focused to where it sounds like you're an insect inside of the fretless bass, but then you have other things that are like in the 50s when hi-fi and stereo became a thing. It was like Esquivel records, being branded as hi-fi records. And the clave is like, it's got so much verb, it sounds like it's coming from Jupiter. Like, well, let's put the drums or the percussion in the chamber and just have those be the sort of two poles and then fill everything in between. It's like a sonic experiment, but you have this music, this composition that's really incredible at the foundation of it. So it's not like, well, let's just think of something to play while we figure all this technical engineering shit out. It was sort of a really wonderful combination of things that happened. But yeah, a lot of things have just come from being in the space and getting other people to come in here and see what it is. The art of like being a really good session player, or the art of knowing what to do to make a record come alive, is so unique from the art of knowing what to do to make a room come alive, like on a stage, a live performance. It's interesting because they're almost opposite. Like, I think in a live show, volume and energy and intensity, all that stuff translates immediately to the audience. You've got more air to move, and people are experiencing things with their own ears. It's not like being translated through a microphone, and people are receiving that energy in real time. But in a studio, playing like that or singing like that, it kind of like, I don't know, usually flattens the thing. Like you hit the drum too hard and it just kind of goes in front of a microphone. When you hit it really hard in a room, everybody goes, wow. So it's a very different science, and there are people who devote their lives to figuring out what makes a track come alive on a record. There's some, they're real When I lived in Venice, I had some friends who had a surf shop, or who worked at a surf shop out there. And after a session that had like 4 guitar players on it, I just remember us sitting around, there was some piece of gear that was broken, so there was some dead time, and we started playing. And it was so different from the music that we were there to work on. And it felt so good. It was sort of like taking a break, you know, it's like the break room at work or something. And at the end of the day, we were just like, man, this is the last day and everybody's gonna be leaving town. Like we should just go somewhere and where we could play. I had some friends who had a surf shop. You know, I called them and they were like, yeah, you guys could totally come here and play. We'll be here all night. So that's what we did. And it was like Smokey Hormel and maybe Charlie Sexton and Benmont. It turned into this tradition. Like anytime people were in town for a session, which was quite often, we would go to the surf shop and play. We wouldn't tell anybody we were doing it. There was no set list. It wasn't a performance. It was just like a jam, and it was not noodly or anything. It was always like songs. You know, we were playing songs that we knew, but the odd combination of who was at those things would influence the sound of how we would play these songs. And it turned into something pretty regular. And Jim and Benmont would come down for a lot of them and play. And it's kind of like the purest thing for session guys or recording musicians, like to get to do that with, you know, with your comrades, and it's not being recorded and it's not a show, and it was a really like precious thing, I think, for all of us. And I got to spend a lot of time with my heroes, essentially, in this very intimate, very casual setting. And it just blew my mind. But I think more than the records that a lot of these guys have played on, that probably informed what I know that they do, or what I know they're capable of doing. It's like that I've seen some shit, you know, kind of thing. Like I really have seen. I've played. God, what was it? I played Sleepwalk with Jim and Pino and Larry Goldings. Where I think Jim, for some reason, heard the song in 4, not in 6, and it was upside down. So it was like, bum, 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 bum. And it was not ironic. It wasn't like, you know, I'm going to do this tonight. It was, for the first 4 bars, we all looked at each other and went, oh no. And then we just kept going, and Jim stayed there, and it was like a psychedelic experience, because we're all looking at each other like, how is this working? You know, what is going on? And Jim was just sort of like, what? You know, it's just like, what, you know, what happened? And it was amazing. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that I think about now when Jim's coming in to plan something. It's just like, what is this going to become, you know? I mean, Jim's a great example of this. And when we were just talking about, like, you know, when you sort of typecast people and think you know what it is that they're going to do. The joy for me in working with Jim is thinking I know what he's going to do and hearing him do something that is completely the opposite. One of my favorite experiences working with him was on the Perfume Genius record, Set My Heart on Fire Immediately. He came in and responded to what I think for anybody would be really strange music. And this one song with all these odd bars, and it was this sort of sludgy, grungy, and we got this really wild tone on the drums before he even sat down. So he was kind of, it was just like a, let's shock him and just see what happens and see how he responds. It's nothing felt like and being the consummate, ultimate, coolest dude on the planet, you know, the performance is just this cool as a cucumber, like nailing all of these odd bars and sometimes getting tripped up by them in a way that reverses the backbeat, and then his instincts when that happens are like incredible. It's controlled chaos. It's a gamble in some ways. With some of my favorite musicians on the planet, it's rolling the dice because they're all wild cards in a way. When to call people in to plan something is kind of interesting, because sometimes it's about personalities. It's like bringing a certain chemistry of personalities together, knowing that that's what you want to have influence the music, more so than having an idea in your head of what it's going to sound like. You just know that, this may be an artist that you want to have them in an environment where they feel comfortable but challenged. And so you call certain people for that too.